Aksharam Hrudi Nirantaram Bhasade Swayam Likyate Katham Hridaya Kuhara Madhye Kevalam Brahmanatram Yaham Maham Niti Sakshat Atmarupena Bhati Hridhi Vishamanasa Swam Chimvaka Majjata Avanachalanarodha Atmanishto Bhaktam Deham Brahmayavat Jadatmakam Aham Buddhirnatasyastyato Naham Tattata Bhavashuddhi Samye Siddhatma Svadbhavaha Koham Bhayuta Kuto Varadhiya Drishtatmanishtatmana Soham Spurtitaya Arunachala Shivaha Vibhati Swayam Soham Spurtitaya Arunachala Shivaha Vibhati Swayam. Moreover, in this, the Thursday Satsangh from Ramana Maharshi Center for Learning, as usual, we will be referring to the work Guruvachaka Kovai by Muruganar Swamigal. We are referring to the English translation. We will be reading 2 verses from the work selected for us. Each verse reading will be followed by a short meditation on its meaning, and that will be followed by the practice of Atma Ucharam for 10 minutes. After these 2 segments of verse reading, meditation on meaning, and practice of Atma Ucharam are completed, there will be summing up remarks by our President, Dr. Sharda. And that will be followed by offering of Sri Ramanastotram by Vaibhavji and Pratnama. We will all sit in self-inquiry during that time and offer ourselves to Bhagavan during the chanting of Ashtotra. We begin today's satsang by taking up verse number 348 selected for us. 348. This is from the segment Investigation into the Truth. As we are aware, the three segments here, apart from the introductory verses, the three segments are investigation into truth, meditation on the truth, and anubhava, the experience of the truth. We have verse 348 embedded in the subsegment, the vision of God. The vision of God. Verse 348. Having become free from concepts, having become free from concepts which are afflicting thoughts, and with the I am the body idea completely extinguished, one ends up as the mere eye of grace, the non-dual expanse of consciousness. This is the supremely fulfilling vision of God. What is vision of God? Bhagavan says in verse 348, having become free from concepts. What are concepts? Which are afflicting thoughts, troubling thoughts. And with the I am the body idea completely extinguished. What happens when these two things happen? When all concepts are freed off, one frees oneself of all concepts, and the I am the body idea is completely extinguished. What happens is that one ends up as the mere eye of grace, the non-dual expanse of consciousness. This is the supremely fulfilling vision of God. We usually begin by darshan of God through the physical eyes. Then we start taking up, meditating on His Nama and Rupa. But Bhagavan in this verse is going for what is finally the real vision of God. When can we say, or when we will find the complete satisfaction that we are now having darshan of God? The darshan of God is really happening. Bhagavan says for that He gives us two things to be performed. Number one, to completely be free of all concepts. And what are concepts? Concepts are nothing but thoughts which are always trouble. So when one is completely free of all thoughts, and the I am the body idea is completely extinguished. Now, from this, one should infer, there is a question by, I think it is Gambiram Seshaya in the work Self-Enquiry, that when there are supposed to be three bodies, the Sthula, Sukshma and Karana, how is it that you say the I am the body idea attributed on the physical, if you work on it and extinguish it, that is the key. Bhagavan says, so far as this entity is concerned, this living in this world is concerned, the other two bodies, the Karana and the Sukshma, are always linked, are always dependent on the attachment to the physical body. So when the I am the body idea is completely erased, along with that there is completely erasing of I am the Sukshma Sharira and Karana Sharira. One need not worry or engage in erasing them separately. But one should always ensure that mere erasing of thoughts is not enough. One should dig and understand that the senses, the sensory body are also thoughts. And when at the appropriate time in enquiry they arise as thoughts, one should free oneself of them. One should free the consciousness of the sensory body idea also, along with the thoughts which represent the Sukshma Sharira. And once we erase the thoughts, what happens? The complete erasing of thoughts indicates that the Karana Sharira or Vasanas are also completely exhausted. That's why Bhagavan says that I am the body idea, the sensory body idea should be completely erased or extinguished. So when these two things happen, that is, having become completely free of thoughts which are afflicting concepts which are afflicting thoughts, and with the I am the body idea completely extinguished, one ends up as being mere eye of grace. Then oneself is the eye of grace. There is no distinguishing or separation from oneself and grace. One becomes merged with grace. For this, the Bhagavan's oft-quoted incident with Muruganar Swamigal, and I think in one other situation, where Bhagavan says that when somebody asks for grace, that I need Bhagavan's grace, Bhagavan says that you asking for grace is like someone standing on the banks of the river Ganges and saying that he is thirsty. Then he amends it. No, that is also not correct. It is as though you are neck deep in Ganges and you are saying that you are thirsty. And he says even that has to be improved upon. No, the relationship between you and grace is that you are actually a fish living inside Ganges. You are surrounded by grace all around. You are living in the waters of grace. You are the fish in the waters of grace, and you are saying you are thirsty. Then Bhagavan says, even that falls short of the true relationship between you and grace. When you say that you are not having grace, it is as though Ganges itself is saying it is thirsty. You are the very epitome, you are the very form of grace, you are the eye of grace. You don't need to look elsewhere. All you have to do is ask, who am I? Keep asking, who am I? Get rid of the thoughts, get rid of the I am the body idea. You will understand that you are the grace. There is no distinguishing between grace and you. There is no receiving, there is no giving, there is no one to give to, there is no one apart to receive from. There is only grace, grace, grace. Grace alone is. Now, that is what is said in Upadesha Undiya. Ulladu unara, unarvu verinmayil, ulladu unarvahum undipara, unarvenam ayulam undipara. To experience grace, there cannot be something more sensitive than grace. Therefore, to experience grace, one has to be grace itself. One has to be that anugraha itself. Ulladu unara, unarvu verinmayil, ulladu unarvahum undipara, unarve nam ayulam. The very seeker merges into that grace and is the eye of the grace itself. That's what Bhagavan says. When all the concepts which are nothing but troubling thoughts are completely freed of, and when the I am the body idea is completely extinguished, one verily becomes the eye of grace. Not only that, this eye of grace is the non-dual expanse of consciousness. This is the grace of the Jnana Marga. This is the Jnanam of this is the grace of the Bhakti Marga. This is the Jnanam of the Jnana Marga. So the darshan of God is the merger of Bhakti Marga and Jnana Marga in Bhagavan. In darshan of God, what is true darshan of God? It is to be completely rid of all concepts. It is to be completely extinguished from the idea I am the body. There one verily becomes the eye of grace. The eye of grace and the completely non-dual expanse of consciousness are one and the same. So when one is doing self-enquiry, When one is letting go of thoughts and going to that space, to that stilling of the eye, one should completely understand that each time one does that, one is allowed by grace to seek it directly. This is the direct method of getting God's grace. How to get God's anugraha? With complete experience of anugraha, it is to do self-inquiry. Whether we have got doubt, when we get doubt whether God is giving us anugraha or not, immediately if we ask for whom is this doubt, the eye is stilled. When the eye is stilled, that itself is the anubhava of anugraha. That itself is the anubhava of grace. That itself is the expanse of consciousness. That is the end of bhakti and that is the end of jnana marga. At the end of bhakti and jnana marga, when completely one identifies as the embodiment, as the grace itself, and when one identifies with the entire space of consciousness, that is the darshan of God, says Bhagavan. This, the complete identity with grace, the complete identity with the fullness of expanse of consciousness, this is darshan of God. This is the supremely fulfilling vision of God. This is the Parantama Sthiti. From there is nowhere to go. Pokum Varavumil Poduveli. The expanse of consciousness, the fullness of grace is Pokum Varavumil Poduveli. That is that space where there is no going or there is no coming. Because all space, all time is all consumed in that one consciousness, is consumed by grace. That is the Parandama Sthiti. Pokum Varavumil Poduveliyinu Arul Poratam Kat Arunachala. There you reveal the play of grace, says Bhagavan in Aksharmanamale. Here, Bhagavan says that the very identity with the grace, the very identity with the expanse of consciousness, by the sadhana of removing all concepts and completely extinguishing the I am the body idea, of course, with the support of grace, because grace is always present. It is with grace that we speak about grace. It is with grace that we think of grace. It is with grace that we do any sadhana towards grace. Therefore, grace is there in the beginning, grace is there in the middle, and grace is there to absorb us in the end. It is all graceful, and one finds that everything is full of grace. Everything is that full, wide consciousness that has no limitations. And then one has no doubts about whether one is having darshan of God or not. This is the direct darshan of God. And it is totally fulfilling because there is no limitation left, nothing to be completed. It is all, there is no going, there is no coming, there is nothing to do, there is only being. Being that fullness of grace, being that fullness of expansion of consciousness, that itself is the completely fulfilling darshan or vision of God. With Bhagavan's immense grace, which is calling us to this direct sadhana of Atma Vicharam, let us sit in practice of Atma Vicharam, which is directly going into that ever-present grace by letting go of thought. Because first thing Bhagavan says, free yourself of concepts. And when even the body idea comes up, either as the sensory body thoughts, in self-inquiry, one has to let that go also and hold the I take it to the source by stilling it. With Bhagavan's immense grace, let us sit for 10 minutes in practice of Atma Vicharam. Revati, you set the time for us. Thank you. Namo Ramana. We continue the satsang by taking up the second verse. Selected verse number 600. This is from the segment Meditation on the Truth. This subsegment is Displaying Ignorance. Displaying Ignorance, verse number 600. Those who have learned the truth of the Supreme Self through scriptures alone, who have a high opinion of themselves because of their superior intellect, but who fail to attain quiet repose by inquiring into the one who has learned the scripture, thereby established in Mauna. What can one say of their ignorance? This is called as the Shastra Vasana is mistaken for Jnana. Those who have learned the truth of the Supreme Self through scriptures alone, who have a high opinion of themselves because of their superior intellect, and who fail to attain quiet repose by inquiring into the one who has learned the scriptures, thereby immersing themselves in bliss. These people test those who are established in Mauna. What can one say of their ignorance? The whole of the exchange of dialogues in Bhagavan's Sannidhi contains many instances where those who are well read, they question Bhagavan. Let me take one instance for you. Venkateshji has been reading one such instance. Talk number 295 in the morning satsangs. So that comes immediately to mind. Mr. Natwarlal Parekh, a Gujarati, nothing against this person. It's only the Shastra Vasana and what it makes us do that is being highlighted. Mr. Natwarlal Parekh, a Gujarati gentleman who had attended the International Religious Conference as a delegate from Baroda, came here on a visit. He is a young man, well-groomed, alert, and quite conscious of his well-earned merit. He presented a note containing some questions to Sri Bhagavan. Pray help me realize Atma, Paramatma, Satchitananda. Bhagavan says, Atma, Paramatma, Satchitananda mean one and the same thing, the self. The self is eternally realized. Otherwise, there will be no pleasure in it. If it is not eternal, it must have a beginning. What begins will also end. So it is only transient. There is no use seeking for temporary state of affairs. Is that it is the state of effortless, ever alert peace. Effortlessness while remaining aware is the state of bliss That is realization. So in this verse also what? Those who realize the self by immersing their mind in the self will experience bliss, the verse says. Similarly, Bhagavan says, effortlessness while remaining aware is the state of bliss, that is realization. The person who has come, the young man who is apparently well learned, says to Bhagavan, I do not want intellectual answers. I want them to be practical. Bhagavan, yes, direct knowledge does not require intellectual discourses. Since the self is directly experienced by everyone, they are not at all necessary. Everyone says, I am. Is there anything more to realize? Devotee, it is not clear to me. Bhagavan, you exist. You say, I am. That means existence. Devotee, but I am not sure of it. That is my existence. Bhagavan, oh, who then is speaking now? The young man says, I surely. But whether I exist or not, I am not sure. Moreover, admitting my existence leads me nowhere. Like this, the discussion goes on for more than 3-4 pages in the talks, 2 to 3 pages in the talks. The very tenor of the questioner is what is captured in this verse. When one has book reading, when one doesn't come to sadhana out of seeking liberation or out of seeking the truth of the experience and is merely relying on book experience, book learning, one may have intricate ways of arguing and finding the contents of the scriptures through their intellect, and the intellect becomes more and more refined and more like a knife. But that is not anubhava. And many a time the Shastra Vasana mistakes itself for jnana. This is a danger that Ganapati Muni also alerts in Chatvarimshat. He pleads to Bhagavan that these days are the days where intellectual knowledge portrays itself as jnana. Therefore, you have to come and save the situation. He pleads to Bhagavan. Now, in the Ulladanarpada Anubandham, Bhagavan has reserved some verses after the Jnana Anubhava. Usually after Jnana Anubhava, there will be no other verses. The Jnana Anubhava will be the final verses. But in Ulladanarpada Anubandham, there are verses which caution one from Shastra Vasana. Merely quoting, merely relying on quotes from the intellect, that is not Anubhava. And those verses say that one should inquire who is the learned one. So that is what is mentioned here also. But who fail to attain quiet repose by inquiring into the one who has learned the scriptures. Who has learned? Katravan Yavan. That is what one has to ask. The ego has to go and merge itself in the source. Just for me to speak English in this evening, the Atma Shakti, the Ishvara Shakti, even in scientific manner if we think, for hundreds of thousands of years, the physiology of the brain, the language itself as mind, has been developed and shared and built. But if this ego, apparently identified with the body born in 1962, claims that it is speaking, how ignorant it is, how ignorant of the truth of things it is. That is what Bhagavan says. When such a one who is relying on merely book learning, merely knowledge, which to itself is composed of millions of years of evolution, it claims to be itself that I have learned all this. And on top of all that, it goes and meets the jnani, it goes and meets the jnani's teachings and starts questioning him. These people test those who are established in Mauna, and Bhagavan is patiently answering him. And finally, in that talk, the questioner is given the peace of mind, is given the answers that he is seeking, and apparently he goes in a state of peace. Even such a one is not denied by Bhagavan. There must have been some merit somewhere. But the problem of Shastra Vasana is very clear. The problem of quoting is very clear. We had a very great speaker from, he was the priest, chief priest of the Padmanabha Swami temple in Kerala. And he was practicing self-enquiry in Tiruvannamalai. And he had come to speak and address us in Ramanacentre Center for Learning, to our great blessing. Now, that day we had given him a topic from the center, and he was dwelling on the topic, mainly by taking quotes from the scriptures. And that was one part. Then after 10 minutes of that, he went into half an hour of his anubhava of relating to Padmanabha Swami. He would say, daily, being the priest, I would treat him as the living deity. And when he goes to sleep, I'll be torn apart. And his explanation was completely connecting, completely uplifting each one of us in the audience. Because it was of anubhavam, it was of experience. Whereas when we merely quote, there is no contact at all. There is gap between mind and what it says. Therefore, there is no impact when we speak also. That's why Bhagavan says here, Atma Anubhavam is the key. The Anubhavam of merging the ego into the self. Merging who is the person who is learned. And not merely quoting. Even when we quote, we should first make it our own. We should make it our own experience. That this is what Bhagavan says. And this is the same experience I am having. And in that sense, we quote Bhagavan as it has come from that source itself. Then that anubhavam, the anubhavam of resting in the self, it comes and the words are strengthened by it. Otherwise, it is merely Shastra Vasana. And there is no point in testing each other. Testing jnani is one. Even testing each other in a satsang is a mere waste and mere show of pride and ego. Because what Bhagavan teaches is not testing of others. It is only taking oneself to the source. The maximum sharing we can do is to share about Bhagavan's teachings of surrender, teachings of Atma Vicharan, which hardly needs testing anyone. Therefore, the wrong practice of testing another should be completely dropped, and one should practice surrender, and one should practice Atma Vicharan, and take the one who has learned to the source by asking, who is the one who has learned all these scriptures? Who am I? With Bhagavan's immense grace, let us sit in practice of Bhagavan's teachings for 10 minutes. Revathi, you set the time for us. One more, I request our President, Dr. Shardaka, to give us summing up remarks. More,
Namo Ramana. Prostrations to Ramana, shining as the self in all beings. By the great grace of Bhagavan, just this on this Navami day, which is the day of the goddess of learning, we do puja to Saraswati. And on this day, we have been blessed to offer our salutations to the Atma Vidya Saraswati, who is Bhagavan, by meditating on his teachings and by doing self-inquiry. And in the exposition of the first verse, which Bhagavan gave to us, Nandakumar ji brought out that it is grace, grace, grace. Bhagavan says, grace is in the beginning, grace is in the middle, grace is in the end. There's nothing but grace. And he says, if you do not interfere, you will be able to experience it. If you do not interfere with the grace, if you do not obstruct the grace. And in the second verse, he tells us, what is it that obstructs the grace? What is it that obstructs the experiencing of grace? What is it that prevents us from becoming one with it, of dissolving in it, like Bhagavan says in his Ashtakam, Uru Sarukarai Uru, like a sugar doll in the sea. He says one should dissolve. But what prevents us? And he says it is the intellect. It is an intellect which is mere intellect. Because he says if you have come with only knowledge of Shastra, that means mere intellect, that intellect which is not having the beauty or the, we say in Tamil, the eram, the moisture. It is dry. It doesn't have the moisture of love, Guru Bhakti, surrender. It doesn't have the moisture of experience. Either way, either it can have surrender, it can have love for the Guru, can have reverence for God. Such an intellect will be able to transcend itself. But Bhagavan points out to us the limitation of the intellect, and two facts come to my mind, two incidents come to my mind. One is Kanakama narrating to me that the story, the legend of Arunachala, of Brahma and Vishnu seeking the beginning and the end of that endless column of light, which is Shiva, which is the self. Shiva is the self. And Brahma and Vishnu here signify, she said, not really the great gods, but those two supreme powers within us, the ego and the intellect. And she said that ego is the capacity to possess. One may possess, of course, one may possess knowledge as well, but the capacity to possess material things is seen as Vishnu, or the ego, as the Lakshmi Pati, the Lord of Lakshmi, who is the goddess of all wealth. And Brahma is seen to represent the intellect, which is the goddess, the Lord of, the goddess of learning, Brahma. So in that story, in one version of the story, it is said that while Vishnu accepts defeat, Brahma does not accept defeat, and he utters an untruth because he does not want to accept defeat. And she says, Kanakamma told me that when we have material wealth, we may lose it at some point of time, and when we lose it, we will accept defeat. Whereas when we think that we know something, whatever it is we know, once we think we know something, it is very difficult for us to get to a position of saying, I do not know. I do not know. The entire sadhana that we perform in self-inquiry is to get us to a point of accepting, I do not know. I do not know anything. Because when I do not know who I am, then the entire edifice that I have built on this person who I am, all the knowledge that this person has is equally unreliable as that person. Any thought of mine is unreliable because it is my thought. Any conclusion which I come to is unreliable because it is my conclusion. And I myself, as an entity, am unreliable. And that is why it is said that the intellect is a huge stumbling block. The mere intellect, the mere knowledge of the scriptures. But if by Bhagavan's grace, if the intellect itself, which is the greatest tool as well, can recognize the truth of what is said in this statement and recognize that mere intellectual knowledge is worthless, then it can transcend itself. It can surrender itself. And when it surrenders itself, it will get into that experience of grace, the non-dual experience of grace. When it recognizes that I do not know, I cannot know, and anything that I may know, even if I know, even if apparently I know something, all that knowledge is mere chaff. It's merely meaningless. Nothing that I know carries any meaning apart from the self. There is nothing which is meaningful. That's what the intellect must help itself to recognize. Otherwise, it can become a big stumbling block. And that's what Bhagavan actually gives the story of one Roma Maharishi who wanted to learn the entire Vedas. He had this desire and he had a very, very, very long life. Very long means so many millions of thousands of yugas he had as his lifespan. And he knew how much his lifespan was. And at the end nearing the end of his lifespan, he had not finished even the study of one Veda. So he prayed to God that he should be given an extension, and he was given one more lifespan. But at the end of the second lifespan, he had again not finished, and again he prayed, and again he was given one more lifespan. And the third lifespan, he was studying, it was coming to an end, and he had a thought, maybe I should pray once more for an extension. And that night, the grace decided to envelop him in the form of a dream. He got a dream in which he saw 4 huge hills of sugar, huge hills, and one very, very monstrous and big ant, which was quickly picking up the sugar from one of the hills and taking it and putting it near its house, picking it up, taking it and putting it near its house. That's all it was doing continuously from morning till night. And when he had this dream, by the grace of the Supreme, he understood that what was the point of shifting all the knowledge in the world to his house? What is the point of shifting all the knowledge of the Vedas to his mind? What needed to be done was for the ant to taste the sugar, to have the essence, the taste of what the Vedas is saying. Veda Purul Arul Arunachala. Vedantatte Veraravilangum. Veda Purul Arul Arunachala, says Bhagavan. The essence of the scripture is what we need to seek in terms of experience. Again in Ulladhan Arpada he says, Adaniyan Rammareigal Artidavum Tannai Eduvendru Than Tendiradu Idunan Aduvendru Endru I forget its second part. It's only weakness of, he says, it's weakness of mind if you just keep on arguing. So we argue, we don't necessarily get to argue with great jnanis, but we may do that also. But the mind is constantly arguing, it's constantly finding reasons, saying this is not right with the world, this is not right. You see, that's why Bhagavan says, even with God, we always find fault with God, who is the greatest jnani. Who is God? God is the greatest jnani after all. That's why whenever he appears on earth, he appears only as a great jnani. So, and therefore, we find fault. What finds fault? The intellect finds fault. Instead of experiencing even an iota of that which Bhagavan has given to us, the essence of the scripture, so easily, so sweetly, so lovingly, in his grace, he has given it to us for us to experience. So it is for us to question the intellect whenever it rises. And this is a warning he is giving us, because we do not know where it can carry us away. We have seen, we may recognize the presence of the intellect in others. We may recognize how it is making them look down upon somebody else. But we must recognize it in ourselves. Nandakumar ji is very sweet to repeatedly explain to me and to all of us that each of these words is for us. It is not for us to judge anybody. And there's also, Bhagavan is pointing out to us not to judge. When he says don't judge the great jnani, of course, we can even judge the jnani. That much is our intellect. We will even judge the jnani. Forget about if we will judge the jnani, whom will we spare? We will not spare anybody else. So Bhagavan says, don't waste your intellect for judging others. Use it to get back to the eye of grace and abide. Use it because it is a great power given by God. Everything, every aspect of our life is a great power given by God. And the greatest of them, the greatest of tools is the intellect, because a sharp intellect can hold on to self-inquiry. It can comprehend the beauty of self-inquiry, and it can really convince itself about the power of self-inquiry and the need for self-abidance. So by Bhagavan's grace, let our intellect, what little we have of it, be used for the highest purpose. Om Namo Bhagavate Shri Ramanaya.
Namo Ramnaka, thank you.
Namo Ramnaka.
Namo Ramnaka, Eloji and Pratnama. Can we start the chanting? Namo Ramnaka.
Namo Ramana. भारद्वाज विश्वनाथ विरचितम् श्रीरमणाष्टोत्तर शतनामावलिः अपार सच्चित् सुखवादिराशे यस्योऽभिमात्रम् भुवनम् समस्तम् गुहाहितम् तम् रमणम् गभीरम् चिन्ताविहीनम् हृदि चिन्तयामि ॐ महासेन मुहुंसेन जाताय नमः। ॐ श्रीरमणाय नमः। ॐ गुरवे नमः। ॐ अखण्डसंविदाकाराय नमः। ॐ महायसे नमः। ॐ कारणोद्भवाय नमः। ॐ जगद्धितावताराय नमः। ॐ श्रीभूमिनाथस्थलुस्थिताय नमः। ॐ पराशरकुलोत्तंसाय नमः। ॐ सुन्दरार्यतपःफलाय नमः। ॐ कमनीयसुचारित्राय नमः। ॐ सहायाम्बा सहायवते नमः। ॐ शोणाचलमहोलीनमानसाय नमः। ॐ स्वर्णहस्तकाय नमः। ॐ श्रीमद्द्वादशान्तमहास्थले लब्धविद्योदयाय नमः। ॐ महाशक्तिनिपातेन प्रबुद्धाय नमः। ॐ परमार्थविदे नमः। ॐ तीव्राय नमः। ॐ पितृपदान्वेषिणे नमः। ॐ इन्दुमौलिना पितृमते नमः। ॐ पितुरादेशतः षोडशैलं प्राप्ताय नमः। ॐ तपोमयाय नमः। ॐ उदासीनाय नमः। ॐ महायोगिने नमः। ॐ महोत्साहाय नमः। ॐ कुशाग्रदिये नमः। ॐ शान्तसङ्कल्पसंरम्भाय नमः। ॐ सुसन्दृशे नमः। ॐ सवित्रे नमः। ॐ स्थिराय नमः। ॐ तपक्षपितसर्वाङ्गाय नमः। ॐ फुल्लाम्बुजविलोचनाय नमः। ॐ चन्द्रिकासितहासश्रीमण्डिताननमण्डलाय नमः। ॐ चूतवाट्यां समासीनाय नमः। ॐ चूडिताखिलविभ्रमाय नमः। ॐ वेदवेदान्ततत्त्वज्ञाय नमः। ॐ चिन्मुद्रिणे नमः। ॐ त्रिगुणातिगाय नमः। ॐ विरूपाक्षगुहावासाय नमः। ॐ विराजगचलाकृतये नमः। ॐ पूर्दीतनयनाय नमः। ॐ पूर्णाय नमः। ॐ रचिताचलताण्डवाय नमः। ॐ गम्भीराय नमः। ॐ परमाचार्याय नमः। ॐ सुप्रसन्नाय नमः। ॐ अभयप्रदाय नमः। ॐ दक्षिणास्यनिभाय नमः। ॐ धीराय नमः। ॐ दक्षिणाभिमुखाय नमः। ॐ स्वराजे नमः। ॐ महर्षये नमः। ॐ भगवते नमः। ॐ ईड्याय नमः। ॐ भूमविद्याविशारदाय नमः। ॐ विमलाय नमः। ॐ दीर्घदर्शिने नमः। ॐ आप्ताय नमः। ॐ ऋजुमार्गप्रदर्शकाय नमः। ॐ समदृशे नमः। ॐ सत्यदृशे नमः। ॐ सत्याय नमः। ॐ प्रशान्ताय नमः। ॐ अमितविक्रमाय नमः। ॐ सुकुमाराय नमः। ॐ सदानन्दाय नमः। ॐ मृदुभाषिणे नमः। ॐ दयाळवाय नमः। ॐ श्रीशूणाचलरुद्भूतस्कन्दाश्रमनिकेतनाय नमः। ॐ सद्दर्शनोपदेष्ट्रे नमः। ॐ सद्भक्तवृन्दपरिवृताय नमः। ॐ गणेशमुनिवृन्देन सेविताङ्घ्रिसरोरुहाय नमः। ॐ गीतोपदेशसारादिग्रन्थसञ्छिन्नसंशयाय नमः। ॐ वर्णाश्रममतातीताय नमः। ॐ रसज्ञाय नमः। ॐ सौम्याय नमः। ॐ आत्मवते नमः। ॐ सर्वावनिमतस्थानाम् आराध्याय नमः। ॐ सर्वसद्गुणिने नमः। ॐ आत्मारामाय नमः। ॐ महाभागाय नमः। ॐ मातृमुक्तिविधायकाय नमः। ॐ विनताय नमः। ॐ विनुताय नमः। ॐ विप्राय नमः। ॐ मुनीन्द्राय नमः। ॐ पावकोज्ज्वलाय नमः। ॐ दर्शनादगसंहारिणे नमः। ॐ मौनेन स्वात्मबोधकाय नमः। ॐ मृच्छान्तिकरसान्निध्याय नमः। ॐ स्मरणाद्बन्धमोचकाय नमः। ॐ अन्तस्तिमिरचण्डांशवे नमः। ॐ संसारकारकाय नमः। ॐ शोणादिशस्तुतिद्रष्टे नमः। ॐ हार्दविद्याप्रकाशकाय नमः। ॐ अविच्युतनिजप्रज्ञाय नमः। ॐ नैसर्गिकमहातपसे नमः। ॐ कमण्डलुधराय नमः। ॐ शूरकौपीनवसनाय नमः। ॐ गुहाय नमः। ॐ दण्डपाणये नमः। ॐ कृपापूर्णाय नमः। ॐ भवरोगविषद्वराय नमः। ॐ स्कन्दाय नमः। ॐ देवतमाय नमः। ॐ अमर्त्याय नमः। ॐ सेनान्ये नमः। ॐ पुरुषोत्तमाय नमः। ॐ श्रीरमण भगवते नमः। श्रीरमणाष्टोत्तरशतनाम पूजां समर्पयामि। यस्थानोररुणाचलस्य पदयोः श्रित्याजलिं प्राप्यत दिव्यानुग्रह सुप्रवाह विवश सादात्म्यभावं गतः निर्निष्ठस्वरधीर नित्यतपसा लोकान् पुनासेकराट् तस्मै श्रीरमणाय ते नमैदं लोकोत्तर ज्योतिषे। ॐ नमो भगवते श्रीरमणाय।
नमो रमण वैभव जी, नमो रमण।